Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Resilient Aging Unfiltered podcast. I'm so lucky today and honored to be joined by one of the foremost experts on wise aging and wisdom and resilience in aging, Dr. Dilip Jeste. Thank you for being here, Dr. Jeste.
Thank you very much, Dani, for having me here. What you do for brain love is really amazing. And I want to compliment your work on helping resilient aging.
Oh, thank you. That means so much coming from you, especially. So I'd love to start out providing your bio to everyone. Dr. Dilip Jeste is Director of Social Determinants of Health Network, President-elect of World Federation for Psychotherapy, and Editor-in-Chief of International Psychogeriatrics. He is former Senior Associate Dean for Healthy Aging and Distinguished Professor of Psychiatry and Neurosciences at the University of California, San Diego. He completed his medical education in India, psychiatry residency at Cornell, and neurology residency at George Washington University. He was a research fellow and later unit chief at the National Institute of Mental Health before joining UCSD, where he worked for 36 years. Dr. Jeste has been the principal investigator on numerous research and training grants. His main areas of research include schizophrenia, neuropsychiatric interventions, and healthy aging, and he's published 16 books and 800 peer-reviewed journal articles. Wow. He is past president of the American Psychiatric Association. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine and was a member of the NIH Council of Councils. He's listed in the Institute of Scientific Information list of the world's most cited authors. Wow. He has received awards from the NIMH, the VA, the APA, NAMI, NARSAD, and various organizations and universities. He was a TED Med speaker, and his work has been cited in numerous national and international media outlets. Wow. That's so amazing. Thank you for just all that you've done and you continue to do. And it seems like you're just getting going in some ways with some of the work you're doing. So I'm curious, you did this psychiatry residency and then you did a neurology residency right after. And so I'm dual trained, as you know, and I'm so curious, like, what inspired you to do that?
Thank you. So first of all, compliments to you, Danny, as I said, for the amazing work you have been doing. I really appreciate that. So as you can imagine, I was born in India. I was raised there. And as a kid, I was a bookworm. I would love to read books. And the books that I found most interesting were Freud's books on interpretation of dreams and everyday errors of life. Freud, as you know, was a neuropsychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just amazing how he thought about brain and mind together. So he thought about dreams, for example, and parts of the brain. And I thought that was so wonderful. And so I really got interested into research and into neuropsychiatry. I went to medical school in order to become a psychiatrist. And people thought that it must be crazy why somebody wants to be a psychiatrist at that time. But I thought that's really something I wanted to do. And I got into research. And that's the reason I moved to the US because I wanted to go to NIH. That's really the ultimate best institution for research, my opinion. And so here I completed psychiatry residency and then neurology residency as a part of my NIH fellowship. And I thought that was really helpful because the brain and mind are so closely related. And even today, I find that one of the most interesting and important things to do.
Wow. So was that required for your fellowship or you yourself? Okay.
It's
Wow.
not required. No, there are a couple of other people also did that, but no, most people did not actually.
Okay. Yeah, not many people volunteer to do a neurology residency or after doing all of the training you've already done. So wow. I just want to go back to what you said about, you decided to do this pursue psychiatry even though in India and especially at that time that was not popular. And so that, says something about you that really drove you and you weren't influenced by other people's like criticisms about that.
Right. I mean, it became really the motivation for whatever I did, and that has continued.
Uh-huh.
And also, one other thing got added later was geriatrics. So I went to doing psychiatry and neurology. I went into geriatric psychiatry. And some people said, why are you doing that? It must be so depressing because what is aging? It's all gloom and doom. is dementia, depression, disability, diseases, and death. And that is not what I thought of where I grew up in India.
Mm,
Older people are very respected. And that's true for many Eastern cultures also. Older people are thought to be wise.
mm,
And wisdom is a thing that are talked about in the, just like in the Bible, there are 12 books of wisdom. In India, our main religious, the Hindu document structure is for what is called Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. It's really a compendium on philosophy of wisdom in life. So that really got me interested in wisdom as well as healthy aging. And as I became more senior and established myself in terms of as a researcher, that was a time when I could get into understanding what is wisdom. Although in the beginning, people dismissed that as a fuzzy construct, not a real one.
mhm.
I could now actually do empirical research and get it published and presented. And I thought that was really very interesting for me.
Wow. So your cultural and religious upbringing and exposure to that, was that something you were exposed to on a regular basis by your family and your environment, or that's something you had to like reach for a little bit?
No, this is not something that, because at that time I was not doing research when I was growing up in India and I moved here. And by the way, I'm not very religious person, as it is more spirituality, and we'll talk about that when we discuss wisdom. But it is this concept that I found fascinating, that what happens to people as they age, that how can anything get better with aging?
Mm,
Especially we were taught in medical school that the only thing that happens to brain as we age is that the brain shrinks. It
hmm
loses neurons, gray matter, white matter, everything, and then it just goes down. Not true. Older people are different. Aging is very heterogeneous.
mm.
And there are people in whom there is actually neuroplasticity of aging. And these are the things I learned, and that got me even more interested in neuropsychiatry of aging.
How long it took to break through and get that research funding and things, because now wisdom is so exciting and a hot topic, and other things we'll talk about like loneliness.
It was really strong personal belief. To me, that was important. Even though other people said something different, they dismissed these things. As I said, people didn't think much about psychiatry to start with and about aging. And when I came to um, the US, the modern Western culture, there is so much ageism involved. Whereas older people are not respected. They are thought to be a burden on the society. They take so many resources away from taking care of younger people. That's wrong. That's so wrong. And this is something I believed in it. And that's what something I wanted to do. And I didn't care too much about what other people said. And what makes me really proud is that how things are changing, and not because of me. There's so many other people also did that. The current decade, T21 to 2030, was declared the decade of healthy aging by United Nations and the World Health Organization. And I think that is what we really need to do. And that is something I was interested for a long time because of my personal experiences with other people.
When you said the brain can get stronger with age, can you talk more about what you found?
Yeah, sure. So what I studied neurology and neuroscience. One of the things I found was so my interest was in wisdom, and wisdom itself actually was dismissed even by hardcore scientists for decades as a fuzzy construct. And I thought that people actually had done the same thing with the consciousness. For centuries, people said consciousness, nothing to do with brain. I mean, it is just a psychological, philosophical, moral concept. Today, we know the inside and outside of neurobiology of consciousness. Same thing about resilience. People dismiss resilience. Oh, it's just something what you think. Today, we know the neurobiology, genetics, and genomics of resilience. And I felt that wisdom was along that line. It is not still there, but it is beginning to. Max Planck Institute was the first place to do some research on wisdom a few decades ago, but it is growing, the research on wisdom. However, I don't see that much growth of wisdom research in medicine. Much of the research is being done by sociologists, psychologists, gerontologists, not by physicians. And I think that is wrong, that we got to do that. As physicians, we focus too much on diseases and symptoms. That's important, of course. That's our job to help. But we need to go beyond that. We need to think about health, well-being, the things
Mm,
that are positive. And how is that possible? How does that happen? And that is indeed what I found most interesting.
Yeah, I love that. That's why I call this podcast resilient aging, because even healthy aging, as we get older, there's a lot of health issues that arise. And as an older adult that has maybe multiple things, they may say, okay, that's not me. And that means I'm like a failure, which is a mindset. But at the same time, it's understandable. And then so resilient, I feel like resilient aging and wise aging can happen till your last breath, no matter what situation you're in. And so it makes a lot of sense. Can you share some specifics about what has been identified, whether it's your own research or more broadly, what is found in the brain or the body in terms of biologic substrates of wisdom?
Sure. So let me just start with what is wisdom, because it was the first question that
Good, good idea.
And so what I did was I didn't want just my idea of what is wisdom. So I went through the literature. The first paper I published actually in wisdom was Wisdom in the Gita. So with another colleague of mine, we did a quantitative, qualitative mixed method study looking at the places where the word wisdom or its opposite, which is foolishness, where those terms were used, and we wanted to find out in what connection. And actually, we did a study using some websites and online versions to make that feasible. And essentially, we found several common components of wisdom, including empathy, compassion, emotional regulation. So we published that paper. But then that was wisdom in the Gita, which was written more than 2000 years ago. What does it have to do with our belief today? So we did a search of papers on wisdom published in the last 50 years or so since Max Planck Institute started the work. And I thought these two would be so different, right? We were utterly surprised to find that the two were very similar. Majority of the components of wisdom were common to the Gita. And by the way, when I talk about Gita, that's also true about Bible and other religious documents that are there. So wisdom, there are several different components of wisdom. The single most important component is empathy and compassion. Empathy means understanding somebody's emotions, sharing them. Compassion means doing something about that. You go and help somebody else. That is compassion. Consistently, empathy and compassion is the most important component of wisdom here. Then comes emotional regulation. So that means control over emotions. If you think about a teenager, the emotions fluctuate from hour to hour, minute to minute. They go from one extreme to another. Whereas if you think about a wiser, older person, by and large, they're pretty calm, quiet. Sure, sometimes they feel sad, sometimes they feel happy, but their emotions don't go to extremes. And also they have a good well-being. They take a positive side on things. So that's a component, emotional regulation with positivity. Then comes self-reflection. We clearly need to understand ourselves before we can understand others, right? So it is understand, and that is self-reflection, where we want to find out what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, because that is how we can do better. Another component is acceptance of diverse perspectives. We live in a world that is pretty diverse, and it diverse in several ways, even demographically, age, sex, race, ethnicity, national origin, primary language. But there is even more diversity in terms of people's views and perspectives. We know that today, especially, we live in a very polarized world. And I'm not talking about the US, I'm talking about the whole world. It has become so polarized, increasingly polarized. People have very strong opinions about something, what to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. People can have strong opinions. It is that somebody who has different opinions than mine, I tend to hate that person and vice versa. That is where the problem is. We should have diverse opinions, diverse perspectives, but we need to respect each other. And they can still be our friends. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can still be friends. I think that is the thing that is missing. And that's actually a component of wisdom. It is accepting diverse perspectives and still having empathy, compassion, and other things to go with them. And there are a few others. I don't want to go into details, but the one I want to mention, because it was somewhat controversial, but now it is a part of wisdom, spirituality.
Oh, wow.
What is spirituality? Spirituality means belief in some higher power. Religious people, the higher power is a God and God in their particular religion. But people who don't believe in that, in any religion, they can still be spiritual because they believe in some higher power. And there's a positivity to that. I think that's the thing to remember, that I believe in a higher power, even though the things around me maybe going very wrong. Everything bad is happening. I don't know what is going to happen. If I believe in this higher power and think that higher power will actually bring everything down to normal and will improve things, that makes me feel good. As to whatever is happening around me, I feel good because of that belief in positive higher power. Again, that has to be high. So these are the components of wisdom. And so one question then was, is it science? And is science, is it neuroscience? Because that's what my belief was, that it is neuroscience. So where in the brain is wisdom located? How do I find that? That's not easy to do. Because let's say if we wanted to find out where are the brain changes in Alzheimer's disease, in a way that's easier because we diagnose Alzheimer's disease, right? And then we can look at the brain and compare them with normal brain. Wisdom, problem is we don't diagnose wisdom or its absence, right? Different people have. Nonetheless, fact that there were common components in the ancient documents and the modern thinking, we feel very good that there must be neurobiological basis for this component. Otherwise, things would have changed from 2000 years ago to now. How come they haven't changed? Because they're natural and permanent. And so it's hard to actually choose people who are strictly wise and unwise and compare them. So what we did was we looked at the literature to find out examples of people who were wise, but then they had some brain damage and they clearly became unwise. Now, of course, you can't do a literature review using word wisdom because most of the neuroscientists don't use that word. So we just actually went through literature to find out about these kind of brain injuries. And I think a number of people in the audience will know this. Phineas Gage, probably the most famous person in that site. Phineas Gage, he was a construction worker in Vermont in her late 60s. Young guy, very nice person, very helpful to others, hardworking, but also friendly. One day there was a big explosion and some severe cutting piece went through his brain and affected, and his personality changed radically. His physician described his behavior. So Phineas Gage, he had a major brain trauma. A large piece went through his brain, damaged the brain, and afterwards, his personality changed radically. His own physician has described his personality very well, and we still have those documents available. So as I said, Phineas Gage was originally a really nice guy. He changed dramatically. He started becoming very angry or throwing things at people. He became antisocial. He would hurt people. He would hurt their feelings, but also didn't want to help anybody. So the components that I described, compassion, emotional regulation, acceptance of diversity, self-reflection, they all changed, went to the opposite side. Interestingly, the intelligence did not change. It's only these other factors, other traits that change dramatically. So clearly, I mean, he meets the criteria for absence of wisdom. And where was the brain damage? His skull has been preserved and parts of the brain. And a paper was published just about 30 years ago or so, which used computer techniques and the brain imaging on that, what was available. And there's a paper published in Science from UCLA, and they reported that there is clear damage to the prefrontal cortex, more on the left than on the right. So there is one case, Phineas Gage. There have been dozens such cases reported in the literature afterward, and they are called modern day Phineas Gages. They don't have the word wisdom, but I went through those cases, modern day Phineas Gages, and I find something very similar across board, that there is a damage to the prefrontal cortex, and some of those actually also have damage to the amygdala. And so that was suggestion about how damage to those areas can cause lack of wisdom. Another interesting thing that came out later was frontotemporal dementia. So where is the damage in frontotemporal dementia? Obviously the prefrontal cortex and parts of the temporal lobe. What are the symptoms of prefrontal dementia? The initial symptoms of prefrontal dementia, in the sense before the person develops memory loss and other component, initial symptoms are actually so similar to Phineas Gage in a way that people start becoming more antisocial, less compassionate. The emotions fluctuate a lot. There is a lack of diverse perspectives. And again, that is in the early stages when the damage is really more of the prefrontal cortex side. So I believe that there is good evidence to suggest, again, nothing can be proven, but good evidence to suggest that the prefrontal cortex and the limbic striatum, which includes amygdala and striatum. These are the regions that are important for wisdom. And I really think that is something that should be done. And so there have been more recent studies than looking at using fMRI, for example,
Mhm.
that the changes in the brain activity when the person is doing something. So my feeling is that prefrontal cortex and limbic striatum are the main areas that are involved. Again, we need to study much more, and science will advance as neuroscience improves.
Oh, wow, that's great. And we know that maybe that's an area of the brain that it takes till well into the 20s to be fully formed. So that makes sense too. And lately, I've been thinking because of my field of, Alzheimer's and related diseases, I think about where are these things happening in the body? I'm wondering if there's studies being done on that you're aware of where does wisdom reside in the body? Because I think that's what I want to capitalize on or work with for people who are having neurodegenerative diseases. So is there anything happening with that?
That's a great question. Not much is happening there. Again, because it comes to the acceptance of the entity and the desire to do something about that. And of course, for Alzheimer's disease, people have to do that because it is the most serious condition in older age. And clearly, there's something must be done. That's true for wisdom. However, something is happening on the other side. It's not so much disease, but the fact that why is there heterogeneity of aging? Why is it that some people do better than others? And so that led to this work on neuroplasticity of aging. And of course, that is neuroplasticity, but I think it applies to plasticity of the whole body also. So I know when I went to medical school, if I said that new neurons can form in older brain, people would have said this is totally crazy. It's never possible. Today we know that yes, new neurons can form, of course, in specific regions of the brain in older age, of course, in people who are active. So that's important. And this has been shown in numerous animal species also. People or animals who are active in older age, they actually have development of new synapses and also new neurons. The neurons actually is mostly restricted to the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus and periventricular area. Nonetheless, there is no question that new neurons can form regions if there is activity. So it is really when we talk about neuroplasticity, it's actually a plasticity of the whole body in a way, to the extent that we have control over it. As we get older, there is arthritis and there are hypertension and so on. Some changes will occur that really we don't have full control, but we do have some control. If we stay active, those things are less likely to happen, or even if they happen, they will be milder. And so the increasing sense I'm having in last few decades with research is this positive attitude toward aging. And positive attitude in the sense, as I said, healthy aging, resilient aging, I love the word resilient aging. And it is not out of moral perspective that we need to care for old. No, it is out of science. It is out of hardcore evidence based on hundreds of studies that have been published in major journals. So there is really no question about neuroplasticity. And that's not just, as I said, not just neuroplasticity, clearly the cardiac function, pulmonary function, and so on. This, if we are active, those organs will be doing much better.
Mm.
In most, again, there are exceptions always, but in most cases, they will be doing better. And clearly, what genes we inherit have some impact. The expression of the genes is based on our behaviors. So the point here is that just like neuroplasticity, there is plasticity of the rest of the body, and that needs to be studied. I think really we need more research in this area.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And so easy to understand. I was thinking about whether so when you mentioned the components of wisdom, what came to mind was what we now call the default mode network. And the way I simplify that is I say this is this negative ruminations, this negative talk, this like loop that is sort of, I guess it's the default. We think of it. It's our natural way. It's evolutionary that we serve some purpose, but now it's so ingrained and there's so many people inside themselves for so much of the day and night. And I'm wondering about with older adults, you can analogize it to a muscle that is available once you hit, your 30s, maybe to start working that. And if you don't work it, you don't have it. And so I'm wondering about like a wisdom deficiency disorder, if we want to give a diagnosis to older adults, especially in American culture, that see more and more many are trying to work into like a young youth model of what they should look like, how they should act, when it's like actually there's a whole other world that is available to you. So if you're not working that muscle, though, there's like this major mismatch. And then I think about, and I'm curious about that, what you think about that. And then how young people, how that negatively impacts them, that the older adults that are supposed to be the bringers of wisdom, they don't get that from them. And they also are in this constant negative self-talk, ruminations with, things that I don't want to demonize social media, but it definitely can be a tool for negative if we don't, rein it in, and other things that are impacting that. So that was a lot of questions, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Great thoughts, Danny. I fully agree with you. I mean, along that line, one thing I want to add also is what is aging and when does aging begin? Most of the time, most people think about age, old age means age over 60 or 65. Why? Because that is associated with more degeneration, decline, etc. And that is different from younger life when we just grow and develop. That is wrong. This idea that young age is associated with growth and development and old age with degeneration and decline is not true entirely in the sense varies a lot. So aging begins at conception. So 2-month-old fetus is older than 1-month-old fetus. So and in adolescence there is loss of synapses. So we lose something in younger age. On the other hand, as I said, talked about neuroplasticity, clear evidence that in older humans, older animals also, so are active, the new neurons can form, new synapses can form in specific regions. So this idea that growth and development mean younger age and then degeneration declines older age is really not accurate. Aging is very heterogeneous. Different people age differently. So we may have a 30-year-old whose brain is like that of a 55-year-old. On the other hand, you may have an 80-year-old whose brain is more like that of a 30-year-old. And again, this is again based on evidence and science. So that means we have more control over that. And we are not just driven entirely by how old we are, because we don't have control over how old we become. Every day we become older. That does not necessarily define our biological age. The biological age really varies. And in psychiatry, I have heard some people say that, as physicians, the first question we ask of a patient is, how old are you? That's the wrong question. The question we should ask is, how old do you feel?
Mm.
That is the important question. Of course, and similarly, how old do you act? Because, again, it is not for moral, philosophical reasons. It is because it is based on science and it has value for our life. That if I think that I can do something, no matter how old I am, again, within limits, but I can do more than I think I can. Or we shouldn't just say that somebody else can't do it and that's why I can't do it. Not true. So this attitude is important, that we have control over what we do at all ages. And clearly there are some things which are beyond our control. There is biology. Ultimately everybody dies. So clearly we can't prevent that. But we have much greater impact on how our brain and the body function than we think we have. And especially I like to focus on the positive side. Going back a little bit. So I was the president of the American Psychiatric Association. And in 2012-13, my main job was to publish the DSM-5. And of course, we got it done. Again, it was not me, it's the whole group. But some people said DSM is the Bible of psychiatry. And I said, no, it is not, because it's only psychiatric diseases. We should talk about mental health. 100% people have mental health. 20% people have mental illnesses. And of course, people with mental illnesses also have mental health. So the important is we need to think about something positive in medicine, not just think about diseases, disabilities, and how things go down. Just think about well-being, think that resilience that you do so well studying, wisdom, compassion. Really want people to think about, take that positive side under consideration and follow it for themselves and others.
Absolutely. I will love it someday when there's wisdom and resilience questionnaires done for, when you first meet with your new primary care provider, and reimbursed to go through that process, how valuable that is. And I mean, that's something, of course, we're incorporating it to Brain Love, which individuals with these diseases like Alzheimer's, there's such a pervasive thought that there's so little there. And even if someone is high functioning still and still working, yeah, so it's that mindset is everything. That's what I'm seeing. You have talked about wisdom as not just within the individual, but it's relational. And so I also think that these diseases like progressive neurodegenerative diseases of aging that affect our cognition is also relational in terms of and how the experience impacts everyone. And so I'm wondering about if you could talk about also the opportunities for intergenerational relationships for our society and our well-being.
Thank you. Just starting with the relational, I think that's really important. People are surprised to hear that because they don't know it. Everybody must know this. Social connections are the single most important determinant of health and longevity. Social connection. And this is based on hundreds of studies all over the world that have included thousands and thousands of people. There have been studies of social determinants of health, and that's actually one of my areas of interest now. The most important social determinant is social connections. And social connections have something like 40% impact on longevity. It's really amazing. But what is social connection? It is not the number of social connections. If I use Facebook and other social media, thousands of friends, that's not the social connection. Social quality is what matters most. The quality of the social connection. So I need to have, if I don't have any good quality social connection, and that's what happens these days, unfortunately, for the younger people who are so preoccupied with social media that they have thousands of friends, but none of them is really close to them or they are close to them. We don't need that many. We can even have just 5 close friends, even 2 close friends, even 1 close friend. Something is better than nothing. And of course, the better we have connections and the more connections, positive connections we have, the better it is. There's no question about that. But it's really relationship. Again, as I said, positive relationship. But by positive, I mean where you share one another's feelings, what is going to happen, you help each other. So again, the components of wisdom we are talking about: empathy, compassion, emotional regulation, self-reflection, acceptance of so on and so forth. So if we have them and if we share them with somebody else and some other people, they can be people in the family, in the friends, whatever, that is very helpful for our own health and the health of the other person too.
So thinking about how to build in, moments of that connection that are doable for all of us that don't demonize social media or technology. Yeah.
Right. No, that's exactly right. The one thing I want to quickly point out and then go to that. So during COVID, we knew there's social isolation. So older people actually were thought to be very seriously affected because they don't, they can't go out, they can't meet with people, they can't use internet, etc. And whereas younger people thought that they would do very well because they could connect to an iPhone and social media and so on. There's a paper published in one of the JAMA journals that found that loneliness and social isolation related selective social isolation was significantly more common in people between 18 and 24 than over 60. Why? Younger people had so many social connections, older people didn't, because of the quality of the connections. People had even 2 or 3 that was good enough for them. So it is really important to have quality social connections. The larger the number, the better it is, but they cannot be infinite, obviously. So we need to start and start with our family, the parents, the siblings, cousins. One cannot go outside. We may not have good relationship within the family. That's okay. But so some other friends, colleagues, the new people we met, and so on and so forth. So I really think we need to focus on the quality of social connections because if that quality is there, we can handle stresses. Resilient aging talked about resilience really depends a lot on the social connection because everybody goes through stresses, especially in later life. These are inevitable. There's some things that will go wrong physically, otherwise. But if you have such strong social connections, you always know there are people who will help you. Just that feeling helps our growth and response to the stresses.
And that's been reinforced over that person's life. So they have that strong neural network or networks, whereas an 18 to 24-year-old just doesn't have and hasn't had enough time for the most part, most people, to have built those.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened with COVID in a way, that the younger people, they had never experienced something like that. Whereas older people had been through major stresses multiple times because of huge flooding, earthquake, some bombing, whatever. And so they went through that and they survived, they came out. And so they could actually, they were not that affected by COVID. Yes, it is terrible, but we'll get out of that. Younger people couldn't. But it's just the experience that was important.
I think we both share this dream of more inviting, engaging intergenerational opportunities and experiences where everyone is authentically drawn to it for their own benefit and to share with others, and not because it looks good on their college resume for a young person, or like vice versa, it's a requirement. And I think about, for my work with older adults, and especially with those with these brain diseases of aging, where they're viewed as not having any more value. That is how our society tends. Like, how can we bring out what all that's there? And there's so much there. And then there's the wisdom and other things, and the young people who are curious and want to gain from that, because as you know, in this country, like, families live very far apart often. People are not right next to their grandparents and extended family geographically. Um, so I'm curious if you have ideas or have done things about what that could look like, and how to bring everyone together.
Yeah, no, great point. I mean, I really believe that intergenerational activities are critical. And for the society to grow and flourish, there is no alternative, really. And there is a large study, I think some people would know, that was published some 20 some years ago, Experience Score. This was a study by MacArthur Foundation and done at Hopkins and UC.
Okay.
And so what they did was they took older people who were 65 who had retired, divided them into two groups, and one group agreed to spend something like 15 hours a week helping kids in a primary school the in their town, and for 1 year. And the other group, of course, didn't do that. And they looked at the biomarkers, including MRI, in both the groups. And what they found, for the kids who were helped, they did great. Their grades went through the roof. But older people, they not only felt happy, their MRI showed larger volume of the hippocampus,
Well,
especially in men than in women,
hmm.
compared to the control group. I mean, in women also it increased, but the men, the difference was significant. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that hippocampus grew. It meant that it didn't shrink the way it did in the control group. But the various biomarkers of inflammation, oxidative stress, they were better at the
Wow.
end of the year in this group, not in the control group. So, there is no question. And it helps younger people a lot too. So, when I was at UCSD, actually, what we did was we had some engineering students go through a senior housing community, and they would form a group. So 2 students with 5 older adults, and they would spend a year together, again, just a couple of hours a week, something like that, to develop some new technology that was helpful for the older people. And it was highly successful. They developed actually multiple products. Yes. And the older people were actually co-investigators on the product that was developed. But the younger people were very happy about the support provided by the older people. They're very appreciative. So thank you. And what problems are you having in your real life? And they've helped with that. Great example of how intergenerational activity are for both generations. And again, I think it helps the younger people. Younger people today are doing worse than younger people did 30 years ago. That's on solid data. Again, globalization, rise in technology, social media, all of them are good, but all of them also have downside effect. But if they have help and support from older people, which they need, they will do much better. And it also helps older people, because if they are healthy, then they're less likely to develop various diseases. Or even if they develop the diseases are treated better. Again, with Alzheimer's, for example, we help not only the patient, but also the caregiver. That's, I know, what resilient aging is focusing on, not just the patient, but also the caregiver. So what happens there? So then actually the cost of care will go down for the society. So we are saving money. And so that's something people need to realize. Helping older people stay healthier and happier reduces the healthcare cost for the society. So it is not something we are doing out of
Yeah.
moral thinking. Yeah. No, this is financially, societally meaningful.
For everyone. Yeah. And I imagined as you were talking, the roots of the trees are all interconnected, and how the co-regulation, the calmer nervous system of the older adult can transmit to the young person in their presence, even if that's virtual. So they're getting that along with other things that you just mentioned. And then the older adult is getting that ability to share their wisdom and contribute and mentoring. That's what is the natural development of human beings as we get older. And so that supports these improvement in biomarkers of inflammation and health. That is spectacular. If anybody listeners, want to get into some intergenerational experiences and start some things, please reach out. And I'm sure Dr. Jeste agrees, like this is so needed. So I think my final round of questions has to do with how can we make another person or a larger community wiser?
I think clearly what is needed is a mutual relationship that is helpful to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's critical. We need to be compassionate toward others, also compassionate to ourselves. Self-compassion is important too. I think we need to go beyond selfishness and sort of what we want to do, because, and not, again, not out of morality, but because it is helpful to us. If I work with somebody, if I live with somebody or whatever, I'm friends with somebody and I help them, they will help me. And at some point, there's something will go wrong with me. That's bound to happen. Something bad will happen. I need help. And the other person will help me. But also it makes me feel positive about myself. I feel proud of myself if I have good friends. That if I have good friends, that means they consider me a good friend. So actually I can do that. And that kind of positive feeling is critical for not just survival, but flourishing of the individuals and the society. I really think the single most important needed is this positivity. Even when right now, for example, everybody's talking about how terrible the world is today, the polarization and everything is going wrong and what is going to happen. I say, think about 1930s and early 1940s, what was happening? There was a Holocaust and everything was going so wrong. And people thought that really the world will come to an end. Something happened in 1945. We have United Nations, we had World Health Organization, and they're still around and they're still alive and they're doing well. That is something we need to remember that all right now, yes, it looks terrible. Things are going well. Badly, really. I mean, there is no question that loneliness has gone up. Mortality from loneliness has increased. It's a pandemic. And suicides have gone up. Opioid-related deaths have increased tenfold in 20 years. So something wrong happening. No question about that. But we have survived out of things like that in the past of a different kind. We will survive, but we need that positivity. That where something positive will happen, but we need to do something about that, of course, by helping one another.
It's presenting all of us with a big opportunity with all of these dark things that are happening. So, and maybe that's so. My last question, and maybe you just answered it already, is if you could pass on one message to the next generation of healthcare leaders, care partners, and change makers, what would it be?
I really think it is knowing the positivity and promoting positivity. And in a way, what you are doing, Danny, with resilient aging is something similar. You're resilience, because what is resilience? Means coping with the stress, adapting to it, but growing from it, doing something better. And that's so important because it becomes a role model for others. And same thing is true for wisdom and others. So putting it broadly would be positivity. Think about something positive that would happen, and we want to make it happen to ourselves and to others.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeste. This has been amazing. I've learned so much and feel so much calmer just being in your presence. And I know the listeners will also. If listeners want to learn how to find you or anything exciting you've got going on, do you want to share that?
Yeah, sure. People are most welcome to email me. My email address is dilipvjeste, so that's my name, @gmail.com. But
Great.
thank you. And also compliments and best wishes for your work on resilient aging.
Thank you. And so thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you are listening on the podcast platforms, please subscribe and comment. And also on YouTube, if you're watching us, please subscribe and leave us thoughts. We love to hear. Have a great day, everyone. Stay positive.